Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My fellow Africans, a few days ago, social media was bombarded with images and videos of what looked to be security operatives kidnapping and allegedly stealing from a man who we later found out was an immigrant. A few days later, journalist Bahati's family was kidnapped from their home.
My brother is Kelvin Katunji, he's 38 years old. My cousin is Mugume Latif, he's 22 years old, and their friend was only identified by the locals as Abala.
And of course, this raises so many questions which I cannot say that I have answers to all of them. And I know that for so long now, most African governments, especially those with intentions to overstay in power, have employed brutal tactics to either intimidate or discourage anyone who dare questions their actions. This has been normalized in a way that most of our people are slowly starting to believe that maybe this is how leaders are supposed to operate. For example, recently in Nigeria, there was a young man who for 10 years is still begging and asking for his brother's body to be returned. Sadly, the man who allegedly bragged for shooting him is alive and free and enjoying his life. Now I know that these are sad stories, but I also know that most of you in most parts of Africa can relate. And as a man of influence in our society, commonly known for making statements that are backed up with evidence, it is my duty to speak up against brutal governments like that. It is my duty to make a case against governments like that, whereby you, the wananchi, will be the jury and the judges. Today, we start with a small landlocked country called Uganda. In a normal setting, Uganda should be the pearl of Africa. Sadly, it is slowly being turned into the horror of Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, to understand the gravity of this case, one has to be patient. To confirm your allegations or suspicions against the government, one has to be observant, especially when you are taking a fight against people who claim that they are supposed to protect and serve the citizens. Now, this raises so many questions. And if I was to ask you a question, is it possible for the Ugandan government to kidnap and torture its citizens? The answer is yes. I'll refer you to the 2021 presidential campaign. During that time, thousands of people, young or old, men and women, were brutally arrested or kidnapped and tortured and sometimes killed just because they were not in support of the incumbent Museveni. It should also be remembered that a writer, Kakwenza, was kidnapped, decorated with knives and canes because they feel he wrote a book that disrespects the NRM government, and they allegedly said that he insults Museveni's son. He was later returned to his family with trauma.
The entire 2 weeks I spent in that military detention, they were beating me almost every day. Almost every day. And sometimes they would undress me and beat me severely. I don't know, with the wire, with what, I don't know. They get pliers, they start picking flesh from my thighs. You know, it was very terrible. When the beatings became so severe, I knew that I was going to die. Honestly, I knew that I was going to die because I could feel myself lying in my own pool of blood. At one point I lost consciousness and regained it later and found a doctor working on me, completely naked on the tiles, washing my wounds, injecting me. He would inject me 6 times, 6 injections every 6 hours, and he would bring me about 17 capsules and tablets.
If I was to ask you, that is it possible for the government to steal from its people, I'll refer you to the case of a gentleman called Charles Boronambo. When they found out that he had money, they fake kidnapped him. They really tortured him to pulp and fake released them or rescued him, and then later asked him to pay some money for rescuing him. Can you imagine that?
This is a result of torture. I lost a tooth. You can see how inflamed my cheek is.
Oh, yes, for our viewers. This is when you lost your tooth?
Yes.
Who was torturing you, to be specific?
There were many. One would come and go, but the ones I knew was Bekunda, who was previously handling this matter. Then did
they mask themselves, or they would just come in?
They would just come here. I said, we want 500 million. Tell your wife to bring the money, or else you'll never see sunshine again. And the case is in court of law. So I will stop there. Bekunda, Mohanji himself, who would be supervising the torture.
Mohanji was aware?
Yes, he was aware. And the torture room is just across opposite him, his office.
It should also be remembered that when they made a raid to the mosque with intentions to tie to the shootings that were rampant in Uganda, they never found any connections, but they instead stole from the mosque. They stole from a religious setting. So yes, they are able to steal from their citizens. If we were to ask you today, is it possible for security operatives to be above the law? The answer is yes. You see, ladies and gentlemen, it is very difficult for security operatives not to be above the law when a man who's supposed to be their supervisor applauds, brags for when they shoot innocent civilians. In 2021, he was quoted saying that the shooting of innocent civilians in Uganda was a rehearsal for his soldiers.
And about there being more violence between now and election day.
Anybody who brings violence will be defeated. There will be no violence. And anybody who knows, and that was a rehearsal, that one.
It should also be remembered that his friend, the late General Eddie Tumwine, during that same time, he was quoted saying that police has a right to shoot you.
Police has a right to shoot you and kill you.
It should also be remembered that the IGP at the time said that the beating of journalists is justified in a sense that they were protecting them.
Uganda's Inspector General of Police, Martin Okoth Ochola, says he will not apologize for the violence of security forces against the country's media.
That's what I have no apology. Actually, you are saying, is the police apologizing for mishandling journalists? My answer is, I'm very sorry, excuse me, we shall not apologize. But we shall continue helping you. Yes, we shall beat you for your own sake. To help you understand that don't go there.
It should also be remembered that Kale Kayihura, who to most of you will always be remembered as the greatest instigator of crimes in our country, was once arrested on allegations that under his supervision he lost 500 guns, but was later released without answers. Those guns are still at large, and somehow we still have so many shootings. We have thieves that storm supermarkets and steal on gunpoint. We have people that block ways and steal on gunpoint. And ladies and gentlemen, I believe that those are some of the 500 guns. Now I understand that some of you can or are saying that it is easy to arrest criminals where number plates are easily visible. I want to remind you that in November of 2021, there's what most of you remember as Police Truck 17. It was visible, it had plates, and it was sent to shoot innocent civilians. It shot and killed many innocent civilians at a time when we lost more than 250 people at a time. I can only say to you today that until now, none of the people who are on that Police Truck 17 were identified or were even taken to the courts of law. Now, some of you can ask, if they are so brutal like this, how do they qualify to be operatives? How do they join security forces? I'd like to remind you of a young man called Afande Chirumira, the late Muhammad Chirumira. To me, he's one of the greatest whistleblowers that we've ever had in the country. A man whose family came out and he said, when you speak, you die, and when you stay silent, you will still die.
Expose the mafia to save the state. When you speak, you die. When you keep quiet, you die. Better speak and die when the message has reached the people. I act as a messiah. So my communication to the killers who hold guns is that killing me now is useless. Because as a messiah, I have fulfilled my objective of communicating to society.
Chirumira, on many occasions, he said that so many operatives in the government joined security forces, not because they had passion for it, but because their families had a say in it. Their families encouraged them to join. Their families, the ministers, the other leaders in the forces encouraged them to join.
Wala bayingira mu police olwokubanga abantu abali mu government babakubira akasimu nga interview zituuse kubanga balina apahanga
batakoze bulungi
totegedde okumala kukola bulungi so nga zino yasalawo balina location
zebabufunze tulina abapoliisi ab'ekibogwe tulina
abapoliisi abatayagala kuba bapoliisi naye nga babagamba muje
gwe mulimu oguliwo
bagala bakadets fake jangu obeereko eno tujja kukireeza gwe tofaayo.
So a man who joins with the intentions of pleasing his father or mother, that man will always never put in so much passion to do their job rightfully. And of course, after so many allegations like that from Chirumira, he was shot dead, even after he said on so many questions, so many times, that he's being followed, that he's being threatened. He was shot and killed. Now, you have seen that brief thread of evidence. And so I feel it is safe to say that to those who think that they are immortal, young or old, rich or poor, privileged or not, our final destination is death. And at that time when most people, some people are afraid to say out how you lived your life, some of us will have the courage to say exactly how you served people if you are in any position of power. If you are corrupt or thief, we will remember you as a corrupt officer or thief. If you are a murderer, we will remember you as a murderer. And if you served people with integrity, we will remember you like that. And to the security forces, you should remember that holding a gun with the intentions of shooting innocent civilians or intimidating them does not and will never equate to bravery. You are a weak man or woman when you only feel brave when you have a weapon in your pocket. Ladies and gentlemen, it is safe to say that Uganda is not only a very dangerous place for immigrants, but also to its citizens. My name is Father Meon Soga. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi